Hi, everybody. I am Laura, part of Sea Change Row, a crew attempting to row around Great Britain clockwise as part of the Jubilee Challenge, and telling the stories of all the amazing marine restoration and conservation work that is happening all around the coastline. So Tim Ferrero is a senior specialist for marine conservation at the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. He's been working in the field of marine conservation for over 10 years and currently leads the Trust's Solent Seagrass Restoration Project. And he's here today to tell us all about it. So, hi, Tim.
Hi, Laura.
To start with, could you give your background? How did you get into marine conservation work and specifically seagrass, and then introduce the project?
Right. Well, how did I get into marine conservation? Kind of by accident. I'm a marine biologist by training, and I guess for 23 years I worked at the Natural History Museum in London, and I studied the tiny little worms called nematodes that live in the seabed in simply vast numbers. And then I guess about 11 years ago, for various reasons, not necessarily, but partially connected with the fact that twins arrived in my life, I decided it was time for a bit of a career change. And so left London, moved down to the south coast, and started working in marine conservation. And I guess, obviously, it's has been over the years quite a varied role at the Trust, working on all sorts of things, working with volunteers and survey work and fisheries. But we always had an interest in the Solent Seagrass meadows, and we used to survey them and map them. And through that, I guess, through an understanding of the importance of seagrass in the Solent, eventually came into the realms of restoring seagrass meadows.
Wow, amazing! So the importance of seagrass meadows. What exactly is seagrass, and what is the seagrass meadow ecosystem? Why is it important?
So seagrasses are the only fully marine flowering plants. They're not really grasses at all. They're more closely related to lilies and things like ginger.
Wow.
But they look, superficially grass-like. About 70 species worldwide. In the Solent, we have two main species. They're both called eelgrasses. So we have the Zazostra marina, the common eelgrass, and Nanazostra noltai, the dwarf eelgrass. And the special thing, I guess, about seagrass meadows is that a seagrass meadow adds structure to the seabed. It turns a sandy or a muddy or a gravelly seabed into a seagrass meadow. There's that canopy there. And that really importantly provides habitat for so many additional animals. Some people say, sort of 30 times as many animals in a seagrass meadow. Really important for many, many species, including, sea bass and cod and spider crabs and cuttlefish. All use seagrass meadows to forage in, as nursery grounds, as breeding grounds. And that, I guess, in terms of biology and marine conservation, that's their really important value. But they do some other pretty cool things as well. They, for example, they're very coastal, very shallow water, and they absorb wave energy. So they provide a sort of a natural form of coastal defense. They help to purify and treat our water. They can take some of these nitrates, these excess nutrients out of the water column. They can cause particles in the water column because they slow down the water to sink and settle out. And that's really a key to one of their other functions is that seagrass meadows, through causing lots of materials, sediment and little particles of organic material to land on the seabed and get buried, they act as a fantastic carbon bank. So they store away carbon dioxide in the seabed where it can stay for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And that makes them a really important part of our fight against climate change.
That is so interesting because as a plant, seagrass takes up CO2, but actually, so that's not the only way when we talk about seagrass being carbon sequestration a carbon sink. it's not just through photosynthesis, it is also through settling down all of these organic particles and locking them into the mud in the seafloor. So there's two ways that it takes up carbon, basically.
Absolutely, yes. And in fact, the sort of the photosynthesis, as you like, is really the sort of the secondary part of their carbon storage function. That ability of them to build up and the settlement of material onto the seabed, that is really important. And you can actually see it in action. There are places in the Solent around the Isle of Wight where you sort of step up onto the seagrass meadow because it's accumulated so much material on the seabed.
And all that is due to the 3D structure, the blades sticking out and filtering out, slowing down the current and the particles falling down.
Absolutely, it acts like a filter made of grass leaves, essentially. So it slows down, and you can see it quite dramatically at low tide. If you stand in a seagrass meadow, even if the water's been quite murky when the tide was in, the water kind of goes crystal clear as it drifts through the meadows, and as all that material basically gets removed and drops down to the seabed.
So seagrass meadows have a suite of ecological functions. Why is there a need to restore them? We understand the need to conserve them. Why do we need to restore them? What's happened?
Seagrass meadows cover maybe 0.1, 0.2% of the seabed and are responsible for somewhere between 10 and 15% of the carbon banking in the ocean.
Wow.
So they really do punch well and truly above their weight. And yet globally, seagrass meadows are being lost to this day. Now we're losing seagrass meadows at an unsustainable rate. In the Solent and in the North Atlantic, seagrass is a kind of a vanished habitat because literally about 100 years ago, a disease, the seagrass wasting disease, tore through eelgrasses in the North Atlantic, and we think we lost 90 to 95% of all the seagrass meadows, and they're not really back. So this is what we call a shifting baseline. No one remembers now what it was like to go to the coast and just there to be seagrass everywhere. So in the Solent, we've got internationally important seagrass meadows, and when you stand in one at low tide and it stretches off into the horizon and you think, wow, that's huge. And then you think to yourself, but that's just a relic. It's just a remnant of what we used to have. And the paradox really is, why those meadows haven't just grown back. And obviously over the last 100 years, there's been increasing pressure from man, pollution, physical disturbance through some of our sort of activities at sea, which maybe have hindered that. It could be just that seagrass meadows normally take their time to recover. But we'd really like to get that ecosystem function back with a bit more urgency. And so see if we can push biology and help the meadows to come back a bit sooner and a bit faster.
It's funny, that shifting baseline thing. So I've been working with volunteering for the Solent Seagrass Restoration Project a couple of times, and so I have seen these seagrass meadows of yellow of Wight. But last weekend I was diving in Swanage Pier, and I was super excited to see a few strands of seagrass, like a tiny bit. And as you say, like this area might have been, covered in seagrass, a few decades ago. Yes. But all I see is like the few strands, and I'm, wow, there's a bit of seagrass. Yes. But it can be so much more. Well, and it's important to remember.
And we have those observations from 100 years ago. In 1936, a guy called Moore, he was writing that, before the disease, seagrass was really abundant all the way down Southampton Water and up the River Hamble, if you know your Solent areas, up the River Hamble as far as Bursledon. And, to the best of our knowledge, there's not a blade of seagrass in that whole area to this day. So the loss is... It's very easy to forget how much we've lost.
Yeah, definitely. Historical records are really important. So how do you restore seagrass, and what is the best practice? And first of all, how long has the project been around? How long have you guys
So
tried to restore the seagrass?
The Solent Seagrass Restoration Project, which is funded by Buscalis Westminster and Fat Face and Isle of Wight Distillery and VP Tools, lots of people helping us.
It sounds like seagrass is, more people are getting to understand and appreciate seagrass. That's great.
We hope with seagrass we can maybe achieve the same level of understanding as has maybe achieved with plastics in the marine environment.
Yeah.
10 years ago, maybe people hadn't heard too much about it. Now most people know about plastics in the marine environment. And we're trying to generate that level of awareness for seagrass. So we've been going with the restoration work about 3 years now. And there are different ways of restoring seagrass. In the Solent, nearly all of our seagrass meadows are protected. And so we have to be a little bit careful about what we can do with them. So what we do is, because they're flowering plants, is that we collect the seed that are produced. We don't dig up any seagrass and move it around. We collect the seed. And obviously, normally the seagrass seed will mature, and they're called spathes. They look like sort of very tiny, thin pods, I guess. And they would, when they were ripe, they drop. We have to just get in there before they drop and get them as ripe as possible. And then, in our case, our collaborator at the University of Portsmouth, the Institute of Marine Science, they very kindly donate aquarium space to us. And we have students there that we fund as well working on this project. The seed that we collect goes into big tanks where they have to finish their maturing, and we call that rotting out, which isn't very glamorous. As the pods kind of decay, the seeds ripen, they're negatively buoyant, which is a scientific way of saying they sink, and they sink down to the bottom, and then we can collect them up. And we store them over the winter, and then try and plant them again in the springtime. And that's when I think seagrass restoration is not like tree planting. It's not all worked out. We're still trying to find a way. When we started, we were putting seeds into sort of quite large sort of pods, like a Hessian bag with some mud and sand and 30, 40 seed in it, and planting that. And we grew some seedlings, but they used to go very black and stinky, which tells you that the oxygen is not there. And so we tried making our bags much smaller. We called them ravioli bags, smaller, and planting them. And again, we grew some seedlings, still had some issues with it. So the current method that we're looking at and evaluating is called dispenser injection seeding, DIS. It's a very posh term for using a builder's caulking gun and canister filled with a sort of a sloppy mayonnaise mixture of mud and sand and seagrass seed. And we basically stick that into the seabed and squirt out little doses of seagrass seed into the seabed. And that's the method that we're trying at the moment.
And so there's no more Hessian bag or pod around them?
No more Hessian bag. No, they go straight into the seabed, into the environment. I think one of the other interesting things is that our friends and colleagues at Project Seagrass told us that the shore crabs are dashing in and eating the seed. So hopefully, if we can actually inject them into the seabed, maybe they'll be a little bit far away from that sort of attention as well. So we've done some trials with that. We planted about 40,000 seed this springtime at the site that you visited on the Isle of Wight at Seaview, and also on the Hampshire coast at Cowshot, which is just at the mouth of Southampton Water.
How long does it take for you to see whether the planting is successful? Is it just a case of 1 season, 1 year, or?
Well, I think we would normally get an idea of what the result is in the first year in terms of how many seedlings came up. So we have seen some seedlings, probably not enough to grow a meadow just yet, because what we see is when the plants grow up and they get established and they're growing fast enough, then they start putting out these horizontal roots called rhizomes. And it's when the rhizomes of plants start interlocking and mixing together, and you get this rhizome mat. That's when you really have got sort of established seagrass, and that can take a bit longer. So we're encouraged in as far as we've grown seedlings, but what we're working on now is to try and get our germination rate higher. So we have a student at the Institute of Marine Sciences doing laboratory germination tests with different sorts of let's say soils or sediments, different sort of sediment mixes to put the seed in, and we're watching that very closely to see what it teaches us. Because another thing is, in our dreams, if we had the money and the place and the facility, if we could have like a seagrass nursery, then we would be able to try and grow seedlings and plant seedlings, which might possibly give a better chance of success than the seed approach.
So planting seedlings instead of the seeds themselves. Yeah. And it's interesting to me how science and research can help in conservation. Like, it's very applied science. You're trying to answer a question, not for a theoretical, physical, biological process or something, but you're trying to see, okay, we want more seagrass. How can we do? And science is the perfect tool for that because it's very meticulous. It's by design, it's repeatable, testable. So it gives you it takes time because there's so many parameters to test, but it is the way to find the best method forward and the best practice.
Yeah.
How many students do you have?
We have one student at the moment. Over the years, we've funded 3 additional projects. So we've had someone looking at biodiversity in seagrass, someone looking at the carbon storage function, someone looking at environmental DNA, which is when you go out and take water samples and you can find out what's been living, in that adjacent area. So these are all relative to sort of quantifying and describing the importance of seagrass meadows as habitat. And then most recently, we have our student who's looking at this germination rate, which is this very practical angle that helps us with the restoration. But, we also just try and support as much science as I can. We're still doing mapping of seagrass meadows so we can see what's happening with the existing meadows. And we've had a few interesting things. We had one of our partners, Project Seagrass, had some nematode worms growing in their seagrass seed. So it was fun for me because I could unearth my 10-year-old nematology skills and identify that for them. So that's something we can look at. And we've had a fungus grow in our seed as well, so we can take that and get that identified, and all trying to add to the sort of encounters that seagrass restorers have, and the challenges we face. We try and contribute to the science as well.
And beyond the science to support the restoration effort, it takes a lot of hands, doesn't it?
It does.
It's very manual. So, and as I said, I was a volunteer a couple of times I think I helped plant seagrass when they were still in the seeds, when they were still in the Hessian bags, and also surveyed them, which is amazing because you're just snorkeling around and look at the seagrass and it's beautiful. So what is the project's experience with engaging the local community and letting people in?
Well, when we first started it, it did become very apparent very quickly that we were going to need help. And in the sort of early in February, I think it was February 2022, my colleague here at the Trust, Ellie, advertised for what we called Solent Seagrass Restoration Champions. And I think over the first weekend, we had something like 70 people applied. And I think now...
How many did you expect?
Well, we don't know. We ran a project for 4 years and ended up with 150 volunteers, and we thought that was pretty good. We're well over 270, pushing 300, I think, volunteers now for Solent Seagrass Champions. And it's been probably the fastest growing volunteer scheme we've ever run. at the trust. And we've got a huge age range, diversity of people, diversity of skills. We find things for people to do in a laboratory situation, or of course coming out with us on the beach at 5 o'clock in the morning for low water to collect seed or to plant, or at sunset almost as well, because in the Solent, low spring tides are either very early in the morning or very late in the evening. So we always get nice sunsets.
Yeah.
The amazing thing is, I always say, we can't stop these people smiling. They just absolutely, as an engagement tool, I've never known anything quite like seagrass, because it just recently at the end of March, we were trying to plant seagrass during a horrible weather. We had wind, we had rain, the tide didn't go out as far as it's supposed to. It was appalling. We only managed to plant half the seed that we wanted, and we had to go back again in similarly bad weather.
Oh.
And both times the picture at the end, everyone's smiling from ear to ear, and that's, I think, shows the sort of the remarkable people that come out with us. And long may that continue. We've got lots to do this summer, so we'll be needing lots of volunteer support again.
I think it's getting out on the field and also working as a group towards achieving whatever the task is, planting the seagrass or surveying it. And it's nice to have some, like, an outing that is structured in that way.
Yes.
It makes it feel a bit safer, a bit more fun. You know what you're doing,
Yes.
and you're discovering, while looking at the seagrass and surveying it, I was seeing all sorts of different types of wildlife and small animals.
Yes.
And it just, the exposure is just really fun and really relaxing. And I think it's great. And I have to say that the trust is is trying to make it as easy as possible, right? Like the volunteer expenses are refunded. So trying to remove the barriers to volunteer.
Yes.
And I think that's great, because the more people can see it for themselves, the more they will be inspired and understand.
And it's notable that we can provide that some support, and some people nevertheless just do it. They never claim; they just come along and they join in. But I think we do put a lot of thought into, and certainly Ellie does as well, puts a lot of thought into how to make the volunteer experience really good, because no one wants to volunteer for something and have a rubbish time. Everyone wants to have a great time. In the last year or so, we've started taking people out to snorkel as well when we're collecting seed, and that's magical experience. And last week we all went and got formally trained by the British Sub-Aqua Club as snorkel guides. So we've got that sort of extra backing, as it were, an extra experience, so that we can make our snorkeling seed collection as good and as professional as possible, really. So
that is so good for volunteers who might be a bit worried, and that is great. What do you think the future of the project is? Where does it go? Obviously, you're trying this new method and you have research going on. Where will it be in 10 years?
Well, okay. I mean, here's the completely aspirational answer. I guess in 10 years' time, we will have restored enough seagrass that seagrass meadows will be growing by themselves naturally, and we won't have to be restoring, because I don't think anyone wants to restore stuff so that they have to keep restoring stuff forever. The idea is to reach that tipping point. It's difficult to say. I suspect in 10 years' time we'll probably still be doing the restoration part, because when you've lost 90% of a habitat, that's an awful lot of work to do. But I would hope in 10 years' time that we'll be able to take volunteers out and have them survey meadows that we planted, and be able to say, look over there, that hectare of seagrass, that is the meadow that we planted. That would be absolutely fantastic. I think that would be a total result for us.
It would be amazing also to see the impact on biodiversity.
Well,
and see the waters get richer and richer as the seagrass expand and expand.
absolutely, yes. I mean, to start see those benefits. I mean, it's already amazing what you can see in the meadows that we've got,
Yeah.
and it's it's
It can
difficult
be
to
even more
imagine how
amazing.
much more that we might have. It's brilliant because the
Yeah.
Solent is a great place to see marine wildlife. See some fantastic
Yeah.
stuff from the cuttlefish and seahorses up to thresher sharks off the Isle of Wight. Fantastic.
I'm so hopeful for this concept of rewilding, which is where you restore enough that nature is then able to take care of itself. And as we're doing this kind of storytelling project with Sea Change, and we have investigated all the kind of restoration projects and rewilding projects around the coastline, so many people are working to do like seagrass restoration, but also other types of habitats. And it sounds like there's an appetite from the public to help and to engage with this type of thing, an appetite from corporate partners also to help finance these things. So I'm really hopeful. And maybe I'm biased because I am a scuba diver and I want to see more life and more biodiversity, and seagrass is amazing. Thanks so much for sharing the story of the Solent Seagrass Restoration Project. And thanks so much for supporting our project at Sea Change. And we will be rowing past the Solent soon.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with it. That's brilliant. And hopefully we'll keep our eyes open for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.